Hey, it's Rachel Cooke, your modern mentor. I'm the founder of Lead Above Noise, a firm specializing in helping teams and organizations create better working experiences that deliver better results. So recently, my kids have gotten curious about the TV that I watched as a kid, and I've started showing them some of the old episodes of the classic sitcoms of my childhood. And my kids have some questions, like, where is all that annoying laughing coming from? Or why is the phone stuck to the wall? Or why didn't they just order it on Amazon? Or why didn't that person just say the thing that needed to be said? You can see how the first few questions really just reflect the crazy reality of the 80s and 90s I still struggle to explain. But that last question it's kind of a kicker. I mean, so many episodes of so many shows were basically just about a ridiculous misunderstanding that occurred only because somebody didn't say the thing, and hilarity ensued. This one was a little harder to explain away. In the era of the sitcom, the not saying the thing made for comedy. But in the workplace, where this happens all the time, the impact is really not so funny. It's often counterproductive, even toxic. I run a lot of offsites with a lot of teams that are struggling to deliver results or collaborate effectively or drive innovation. And so often, much of this is solvable with the right conversation. And my job during these offsites is to create a space in which the unspoken can be safely spoken and then addressed, resolved. And one of my favorite tools for making these conversations happen, it's the stinky fish canvas developed by Hyper Island. Because, a stinky fish stinks. The longer it sits, the worse it smells. And when one shows up, we gotta clear the air. And this canvas is designed to challenge you and your team to say the things that need to be said in order to clear the air. So whether you're a leader or a member of a team, take a step back. How open is the dialogue? How productive are you? And how much more productive could you be if more stuff was being said? Let's talk about the 4 big issues the Stinky Canvas helps you get at, and how each has the potential to move your team collectively forward. Okay, issue 1 is, what is everybody thinking but no one is saying? This can be stuff that frustrates you or slows you down or just makes your everyday working experience a little stinkier. It can be things like, our boss keeps talking about how he sees culture changing for the better, but none of us are actually feeling it. Or they make us come into the office every Tuesday to help drive creativity and connection, but really we just sit in Zoom meetings all day. Or everyone knows that the marketing and sales teams don't get along, and their inability to collaborate creates extra work for the rest of us. These are all real problems. Any situation that makes a team less engaged, less productive, less creative is a real problem. But they're also solvable problems. But we can only solve what we can see. So now it's your turn. What's the thing everyone knows is happening or not happening, but no one is willing to say out loud to someone who can help create change? Start by naming the unspoken. Even just knowing there are others feeling the same pain as you are can feel like the first step on a path towards somewhere better. Okay, issue number 2. The uncertainties that make people feel a loss of control. So let's talk about uncertainty, because there is a lot of it out there these days. Change is the new constant and all that. And frankly, the key to managing uncertainty, in my opinion, is talking about it with others in the same situation as you. Like, as a mom, I pose questions all the time to my mom friends. Not because I think they have the answers, but because through our conversation, we're able to generate some ideas together and feel more supported by each other. Sometimes it's scary to be vulnerable, to let people know what's making you anxious. But if you're brave enough to voice it, you'll likely be rewarded with a bit more clarity. So at work, you might be wondering things like, how will we build culture and connection with a workforce that is so geographically dispersed? Or how can we effectively measure productivity in a knowledge-based workplace? Or how are we going to achieve what feels like very aggressive goals and targets? You may have big questions, or you may have smaller ones. But either way, when a clear answer isn't readily available, just be willing to ask the question. It'll trigger some important dialogue with your team, and maybe together you'll find your way forward. Issue 3 is things that are making people feel nervous or afraid. This is the stuff that just feels awful or scary. Like maybe you're watching your company's sales take a nosedive and nobody is addressing it. Or maybe people around you are being laid off and you're not sure how secure your role is. Or maybe you are so overwhelmed with work and you see no end in sight and you feel like you can't say no to anything. Any one of these realities is going to throw you off your game. But as they say, the only way past them is through them. I did this exercise a few weeks ago with a leadership team that is preparing to undergo a pretty big organizational change. At first, the leaders were very hesitant to express any uncertainty or anxiety in front of the CEO. But slowly, as they warmed up, they started putting some of their concerns out there. And once they did, they realized they were actually sparking some really important conversation. Like when one leader asked, "So how exactly are the sales and product teams going to collaborate with the client managers in the markets?" The CEO realized there were some pretty big questions she hadn't really thought through yet. And her team's willingness to share these anxieties really helped her and them collectively set themselves up for a more successful change. So now, what is one thing that you have been feeling fearful about? And what if you were willing to speak it? Might it actually help your team solve a problem? And finally, issue 4. Past issues we're not putting behind us. Yes, this is about our baggage. The stuff that happened and was real, but it's an old story we're holding on to. At another recent client event, one of the participants pulled me aside to give me a heads up. She told me there was some real tension between 2 of the vice presidents on the team, and I should make sure never to pair them during an exercise. Later in the day, I asked the HR person on the team about that tension. She chuckled and she said, "OMG, they worked together on a project like 7 years ago, and they had a few rough moments, which were resolved about 6.5 years ago." Sometimes a thing happens, and we hold it forever as a truth, which is not always so productive. So really, is there something you and your team need to let go of? And if you did, what could you accomplish in that now wide open space? If you or your team could use help facilitating this or any difficult conversation, don't be shy. Reach on out. Join me next week for another great episode. Until then, visit my website at leadabovenoise.com if your organization is looking to dial up its employee experience or deliver some leadership development that activates change. You can follow Modern Mentor on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Find and follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for listening and have a successful week. Modern Mentor is a quick and dirty tips podcast. It's audio engineered by Dan Fauerbend with script editing by Adam Cecil. Our podcast and advertising operations specialist is Morgan Christensen. Our digital operations specialist is Holly Hutchings, and our marketing and publicity associate is Davina Tomlin.